The banker's handshake was firm, almost congratulatory, as she slid the document across her mahogany desk. "Congratulations, Mr. Patterson. The sale of Patterson Industrial Solutions is now complete. $73 million. I stared at the number on the paper, after 32 years of building that company from my garage, watching it grow from welding small parts for local contractors to manufacturing components for aerospace companies across North America. It all came down to this single figure. 73 million. The irony wasn't lost on me. 18 years ago, I'd been standing in a food bank line in East Vancouver, wondering if I'd have enough to feed myself that week. My son Marcus had made it very clear back then that a failure like me had no place in his life or near his new wife's family. His exact words, actually, spoken in the driveway of my repossessed house. "You're an embarrassment, Dad. Stephanie's father is a doctor. What am I supposed to tell them? That my dad can't even keep a job?" I pocketed the banker's card and walked out into the crisp Toronto autumn afternoon. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Dad?" I stopped walking. 18 years of silence, and now this. Marcus's voice, older but unmistakable. "Dad, it's Marcus. I need to talk to you. It's important." I stood there on Bay Street, watching business people hurry past, everyone chasing their own version of success. "How did you get this number?" I hired someone. A private investigator. "Look, I know we haven't spoken, but I saw the article in the Globe and Mail about your company's sale. Dad, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. Can we meet?" Part of me wanted to hang up right there. But I'd spent 18 years imagining this moment, running through scenarios, wondering what I'd say if he ever came back. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to see him, to understand what had turned my son into someone who could abandon his father at rock bottom. "Where are you?" "I'm actually in Toronto. I'm staying at the Shangri-La. Can you come by? Please?" I should have known better. The Shangri-La, one of the most expensive hotels in the city. If he was in such terrible trouble, what was he doing there? "I'll be there in an hour," I said, and ended the call. I took my time walking to the hotel, letting the September breeze clear my head. 18 years. I'd been 51 when Marcus cut me off. I'd lost my job as a plant supervisor when the automotive parts manufacturer I worked for went bankrupt during the 2007 recession. 23 years of loyal service, gone overnight. My wife had passed away 2 years before that from cancer, and I'd taken on debt to cover medical costs that our insurance wouldn't. Marcus was 28 then, newly married to Stephanie Chen, whose family owned a chain of dental clinics across British Columbia. I remembered the engagement party at their mansion in West Vancouver, how out of place I felt in my department store suit, while everyone else wore designer labels. Stephanie's father, Dr. Chen, had barely acknowledged me. When he did, it was to ask what I did for a living, and when I told him I was a supervisor at an auto parts plant, he'd simply said, "I see," and turned away. After I lost my job, things got worse fast. The bank foreclosed on my house. I moved into a basement apartment in Surrey. Marcus came by once, saw the place, and I watched something die in his eyes. Disappointment, shame. He made excuses about why he couldn't help. Stephanie's family had expectations. They were planning to invest in a business for him. They couldn't be associated with failure. The last time I saw him was the day I moved out of the foreclosed house. He stood in the driveway, Stephanie waiting in their BMW, and told me I was an embarrassment, that it was better if we didn't stay in touch, that he needed to focus on his future, not be dragged down by my past. I won't lie, that broke something in me. But it also forged something new, something harder. The Shangri-La's lobby was exactly as opulent as I remembered from the one time I'd been here for a business meeting. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff in crisp uniforms. I gave Marcus's room number at the desk. The concierge called up, then directed me to the elevators. Room 2847. I knocked. Marcus opened the door, and for a moment we just stared at each other. He'd aged, of course. 46 now, with gray threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes. He was thinner than I remembered, and there was something defeated in his posture. "Dad, His voice cracked slightly. "Come in, please." The suite was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a living area that could fit my old apartment twice over. But I noticed the details. The empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table. The laptop with what looked like spreadsheets open, red numbers prominent. The rumpled appearance of someone who hadn't slept well in days. "Nice place," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It's not mine. Stephanie's parents own a share in the hotel chain. We're separated, have been for 6 months." I didn't sit, even though he gestured to the couch. "You said you were in trouble." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's an understatement. Dad, I'm bankrupt. The business, everything. I owe $700,000. The Chens cut me off. Stephanie filed for divorce. I have nothing." I watched him carefully. Waited. "I know I don't deserve to ask. I know what I said, what I did. But you're my father. The article said you sold your company for $73 million. I need help. Just enough to get back on my feet. Maybe $1 million? I have business ideas. I just need capital to—" "Stop." He stopped. "Tell me something, Marcus. In 18 years, did you ever wonder how I was doing? If I was alive or dead? If I was sleeping on the street or had a roof over my head?" He looked down. "I thought about you. I couldn't." "Couldn't what? Dial a phone? Send an email? Or couldn't face the fact that you chose your wife's money over your own father?" "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." I kept my voice level, almost conversational. This was the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind countless times, but now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. "You called me an embarrassment. You said I was a failure. You told me not to contact you because you had to think about your future. I was young. I made mistakes. You were 28 years old, Marcus, old enough to know exactly what you were doing." I walked to the window, looked out at the skyline. "Do you want to know what happened after you cut me off?" He didn't answer, but I continued anyway. "I spent 3 months in that basement apartment, applying for every job I could find. Nobody wanted a 51-year-old former supervisor with a gap in his employment history. I ran out of money. Started going to food banks. Sold everything I owned except the tools in my truck. Your mother's wedding ring paid for 2 months of rent and groceries." I heard him inhale sharply behind me. One night, I was in that apartment, staring at the last $43 I had in the world, and I had a choice to make. I could give up, or I could use that money to register a business. Patterson Industrial Solutions. I started by offering mobile welding and repair services. I'd drive to construction sites, factories, anywhere that needed metalwork. I slept in my truck sometimes to save on rent. Ate 1 meal a day. Worked 16-hour days. I turned to face him. His eyes were red. It took me 2 years to get stable, 5 years to land my first major contract, 10 years to open my own facility, 15 years to start manufacturing our own parts, and 18 years to build something valuable enough that 3 different companies wanted to buy it. I chose the one that promised to keep all my workers employed. "Dad, I'm not finished." I sat down finally, across from him. "During all those years, do you know how many times I thought about calling you? Hundreds. Thousands. Especially in the beginning, when I was at my lowest. I wanted my son. I wanted to hear your voice. To know you didn't really mean what you said." A tear rolled down his cheek. "But I never called. Do you know why?" He shook his head. "Because you taught me something important that day in the driveway. You taught me that I had to be able to stand on my own. That depending on anyone else, even family, even my own son, was a weakness. You taught me that blood doesn't mean loyalty, and love doesn't mean support. You taught me that the only person I could truly rely on was myself." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. I've had 18 years to regret it, and I do, every single day." I believe you, and I did. I could see it in every line of his face, hear it in every word. But sorry doesn't change the past, and it doesn't change what you came here for today. He wiped his eyes. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'm desperate. The creditors are circling. I might lose everything. I just need a chance. Like the chance you gave me? That stopped him cold. I leaned forward. Let me ask you something. If I'd somehow become successful back then, would you have cut me off? If Dr. Chen had been impressed by my wealth instead of disgusted by my lack of it, would you have told me I was an embarrassment? No, of course not. Then your love was conditional, based on what I could offer you, how I reflected on you. That's not love, Marcus. That's transaction. What do you want me to say? That I was a terrible son? Fine, I was. I am. But I'm still your son. Doesn't that mean anything? I stood up. It means everything. That's why I came here today. That's why I let you say your piece. But here's what's going to happen now. I pulled out an envelope from my jacket pocket. I'd prepared it months ago, after I'd first gotten inquiries about selling my company. Call it intuition, call it preparation, but something told me this moment was coming. This is a check for $50,000. His eyes widened. It's enough to pay for a decent apartment for a year, food, basic expenses. It's enough to give you time to find a real job, not to start another business, but to work for someone else. To learn humility, to understand what it means to build something from the ground up with your own hands. Dad, that's not nearly enough to. There are conditions. I held up the envelope, keeping it out of his reach. 1. You will not contact me again until you have paid back every dollar of this $50,000. Not from family money, not from another failed business, but from honest work. His face fell. 2. You will get professional help. Therapy. Because the person who could abandon his father the way you did has deeper problems than money can fix. Dad. 3. You will volunteer. 20 hours a month at a food bank, a homeless shelter, somewhere that serves people at their lowest. You need to understand what rock bottom actually looks like. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. And 4. You will write me a letter by hand once a month. Not asking for anything, not updating me on your progress. Just reflecting on what you've learned. I may not respond. I haven't decided yet. But you will write them. And if I do all that, then maybe, we can start to rebuild something. Not what we had, because that's dead and buried, but something new, something honest. He stared at the envelope. 50,000. For 18 years of nothing. That's what I'm worth to you? No, I said quietly. That's what you're worth to yourself right now. Nothing. You've proven you can't be trusted with real money or real responsibility. You've proven you'll cut and run when things get hard. You've proven your love has a price tag. I set the envelope on the coffee table. This is me giving you a chance to prove you can be more than that. Take it or leave it. But understand this. If you don't take it, I walk out that door and you never see me again. And if you do take it, and you break any of those conditions, the same thing happens. You get one chance, Marcus. Just one. Which is one more than you gave me. He looked at the envelope, then at me, then back at the envelope. His hand trembled as he reached for it. Why? He asked. Why are you even offering this? I don't deserve it. You're right. You don't. I headed toward the door. But I do. I deserve to know I tried. I deserve to know I was the bigger person. And I deserve to sleep at night knowing that when my son was drowning, I threw him a rope, even if he'd left me to drown 18 years ago. I opened the door, then paused. One more thing. The private investigator you hired? That cost you $5,000, according to my lawyer, who's been monitoring any inquiries about me since the sale was announced. You spent $5,000 to find me so you could ask for $1 million. Think about that. Think about how that looks. Think about what it says about who you've become. His face went white. You knew I was coming? I knew someone would come. Whether it was you, Stephanie's family trying to get a piece, or some other ghost from my past. When you have money, Marcus, everyone who ever ignored you suddenly remembers you exist. I wanted to see which category you fell into, friend or vulture. And which am I? I looked at my son, really looked at him. At the defeat in his shoulders, the desperation in his eyes, the way he clutched that envelope like a lifeline. Part of me saw the little boy who used to help me in the garage, handing me tools and asking how things worked. Part of me saw the man who'd stood in a driveway and called me an embarrassment. That depends on what you do next, I said. The friend honors the conditions and does the work. The vulture cashes the check and disappears until they need more. I left him there in that expensive hotel room, staring at $50,000 that probably seemed like an insult compared to what he'd asked for. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. The lobby seemed brighter, louder. Outside, the autumn air was cold on my face. My phone buzzed before I'd made it 2 blocks. Marcus, don't contact me again until you've fulfilled the conditions, I said instead of hello. I just wanted to say, I'm going to do it. All of it. I'm going to prove to you I can be better. Don't prove it to me, I said. Prove it to yourself. I already know who I am and what I'm capable of. The question is whether you ever will. I hung up and kept walking. 3 months later, the first letter arrived. It was barely a page, handwritten on lined paper like I'd specified. He wrote about getting a job at a manufacturing plant in Mississauga. Not management, just floor work. About how his back ached at the end of shifts. About how humbling it was to take orders from a supervisor half his age. About starting therapy, and how hard it was to talk about what he'd done. I didn't respond, but I kept the letter. The second letter came right on schedule. He wrote about volunteering at a homeless shelter, about a man named Richard who reminded him of me, about how Richard had lost everything in a divorce and had been sleeping rough for 2 years, about how easily that could have been me if I hadn't clawed my way back up. I still didn't respond, but I kept that letter too. By the 6th month, the letters were getting longer, more introspective. He wrote about Stephanie, about how their marriage had been built on the wrong foundation, about how her family's money had made him soft, entitled, about how losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to him, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. I understand now, he wrote in month 7, why you only gave me 50,000. I would have wasted $1 million. I would have tried to rebuild my old life, the one built on shortcuts and family money and image over substance. This way, I have to build something real, something that's actually mine, the way you did. Month 8, he sent pictures. Him at the food bank, sorting donations. Him at the shelter, serving meals. Him at his apartment, modest and clean, with a bookshelf full of books he was actually reading. Personal finance, manufacturing processes, biographies of people who'd built themselves from nothing. Month 9, he wrote that he'd paid back $10,000. He'd been putting away every spare dollar, living on almost nothing. His supervisor at the plant had noticed his work ethic and offered him a team lead position with a small raise. He'd turned it down. Not yet, he wrote. I need to prove I can do this at the bottom before I even think about moving up. That letter, I responded to. Just 3 words. I'm watching closely. Month 12. He'd paid back $25,000. His therapist had helped him understand that his fear of failure had driven him to abandon me rather than face the possibility of becoming like me. But you were never a failure, Dad, he wrote. You were just someone going through a hard time. I was the failure for not seeing the difference. Month 15, he met someone. A woman named Jennifer who worked at the shelter. She had her own story of rebuilding after loss. She knows about you, he wrote. About what I did. About what I'm trying to become. She says the fact that I'm working this hard to make amends shows growth. I hope she's right. Month 18, the debt was paid. All $50,000, plus interest I hadn't asked for. He sent the final check with a letter that was 10 pages long. Dad, I've fulfilled all your conditions. I've paid back every penny. I've been in therapy for 1.5 years. I've volunteered over 1,000 hours. I've written you 18 letters, and you've responded exactly once. I don't know if that means you've forgiven me or if you ever will, but I need you to know something. When I walked out of that hotel room with your envelope, I was angry. I thought you were being cruel, petty, getting revenge for what I'd done. I spent the first week plotting how to turn that 50,000 into more, how to prove you wrong about me being incapable. But then I cashed that check, and I paid my first month's rent on a modest apartment, and I bought groceries with my own money that came from you, and something shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living off someone else's success. Not Stephanie's family's money, not my own inherited privilege, not even borrowed money. It was a gift from my father, but it came with a price. I had to become someone worthy of it. The job at the plant broke me down physically at first. I wasn't used to manual labor, to working with my hands, to being exhausted at the end of the day. But it also showed me what you'd done for all those years when I was growing up. How hard you'd worked to provide for Mom and me. How tired you must have been. And yet you never complained. Never made me feel like your work was beneath anyone. The volunteer work broke me down emotionally. I saw people who'd lost everything, and so many of them reminded me of what you went through. But I also saw their dignity, their resilience, their hope. I saw that poverty doesn't make someone a failure. Giving up does. And you never gave up. The therapy broke me down mentally. I had to face truths about myself I'd spent years avoiding. That I was shallow, that I valued image over substance, that I'd absorbed Stephanie's family's classism and made it my own, that I'd been a coward who'd run from difficulty instead of facing it. These 18 months have been the hardest of my life, but they've also been the most important. I'm not the same person who walked into that hotel room. I'm not even the same person who walked out of your driveway 18 years ago. I don't expect you to welcome me back with open arms. I don't expect you to forget what I did. But I hope, someday, you might be willing to meet me for coffee, to let me introduce you to Jennifer. To see the person I'm becoming, instead of the person I was. I love you, Dad. I always have, even when I was too broken to show it. But now I understand that love isn't enough. Love without respect, without honor, without sacrifice, is just an empty word. I'm learning to live those things, not just say them. Thank you for the $50,000. But more than that, thank you for believing I could be more than I was, even when I didn't believe it myself. Your son, Marcus. I read that letter 3 times sitting at my desk in my new home, a modest house in the Beaches neighborhood of Toronto. Not the mansion I could afford, but something comfortable and real. I'd donated $40 million to various causes, veteran supports, job training programs, food banks across Canada. I'd set up a scholarship fund for children of laid-off workers. I'd invested the rest conservatively. I picked up my phone and dialed. Hello? Marcus answered immediately, hope and fear mixing in his voice. There's a coffee shop on Queen Street East, I said. The Daily Grind. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Come alone. I'll be there. Dad, thank you. Marcus. Yes? Don't thank me yet. We have a lot to talk about, and most of it won't be comfortable. But if you're willing to do the work, real work, on actually rebuilding something, then maybe we can figure out what a father and son look like when they're both starting from scratch. There was a pause, then, I'll be there, I promise. Good. One more thing. Anything. The next time you want to know if I'm proud of you, don't wait for me to say it. Look in the mirror at the man who paid back $50,000 by working an honest job, who volunteered 1,000 hours of his time, who went to therapy and did the hard work of changing. Be proud of him. Because I am. I heard him crying on the other end of the line, but they were different tears than that day in the hotel. These were clean somehow. Earned. See you Saturday, I said, and hung up. I walked to my back deck and looked out at the small garden I'd started. Nothing fancy, just some vegetables and herbs. Getting my hands dirty reminded me of those early days, working in my garage, building something from nothing. The money had been nice. The success had been satisfying. But this moment of possibility, of maybe getting my son back not because of what I had, but because of what we'd both become, this was worth more than any bank account. I thought about all those years alone, building my company, wondering if Marcus ever thought about me. I thought about that moment in the hotel when I'd wanted to just hug him, to tell him everything was forgiven, to write him a check for $1 million and fix all his problems. I'm glad I didn't, because that wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have just repeated the same cycle. Him, depending on money, on shortcuts, on someone else's success instead of building his own. Maybe he'd show up Saturday. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe we'd build something new together. Or maybe this was as far as we'd get. But I'd given him the tools, the chance, the map. The rest was up to him. And that, I'd learned the hard way, was all any father could really do. The September sun was setting over Toronto, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, my son was working a shift, or writing in his journal, or planning for Saturday morning. Somewhere out there, he was becoming someone new. And somewhere in here, in this modest house, with this small garden, I was at peace with whatever came next. Because I'd learned something in those 18 years of silence, in those 32 years of building a company, in that moment in the hotel room when I'd chosen tough love over easy money. Success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in character. And character isn't built by what you're given. It's built by what you overcome. I'd overcome poverty, loss, and abandonment to build something real. Now it was Marcus's turn. And for the first time in 18 years, I had hope that he actually could.